The trials that took place immediately after the war were based primarily on documents. In the Eichmann trial, Gideon Hausner, the Attorney General, made a decision to call the victims of genocide. He called these witnesses to tell their personal stories, and they told their stories one by one by one. So people began to associate what happened during the Holocaust, the final solution, with specific people, and in that way it put a human face on genocide. The victims had spoken before, but they had never had an audience the way they had it at the Eichmann trial. The world was listening. I think it was the impact of the intensity, the idea of being in a courtroom setting, that the perpetrator was sitting there in that glass booth. I think all those things together gave what the victims were saying, what the stories they were telling, and added authenticity and authority. People understood that these people weren't inherently flawed, that they weren't inherently weak, but that they were in a sea of opposition, a sea of hostility, and there was no one there to help them. When you begin to hear the story from people, when it becomes personalized, when you hear it in the first person singular, this is my story and this is what happened to me, genocide takes on a new meaning. You begin to realize that it didn't happen just to a group of nameless people, but it happened to individuals. And what happened is their memory, and then the memory gets transmitted to the next generation. It's a lesson to the world of what happens when you stand silently by. In fact, it's more important that the rest of the world, those people who aren't associated with the victims, know about it. Those who were the heirs of the victims, the next generations, you know it in your gut. But it's important to understand, for there to be that click. That's what it means to be persecuted. That's what it means to be a victim. That's what it means to call for help and have nobody answer. I think that that's the importance of memory, that you integrate them into ourselves, internalize them, and then act on that in our lives. I was here as a scholar in residence at the Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. And then on June 10th, as I was on my way downstairs to give a lecture to a group of people who had come to visit the museum, I passed the guard station. I saw Officer Johns and the other officers greeting people. No sooner had I gotten to the room, a few minutes thereafter, shots rang out. And it was a 88-year-old Holocaust denier, racist, anti-Semite, who came to the museum, approached the door. Officer Johns reached out to open the door to let the man in, and the man took out a rifle and shot him. It happened because this killer was motivated by hatred, was motivated by anti-Semitism, was motivated by exactly those sentiments which this museum is dedicated to fighting. And it was such a terrible irony. On this Yom HaShoah, I think it's very important for the world to remember that evil begins with a single individual talking to another individual, to another individual. Maybe they are motivated, as was the case in the Holocaust, by an age-old hatred. But it takes one person with another person with another person to make it happen, and that each of us as individuals have the power to say stop. We may not be able to stop the hatred, but we can say stop, I won't be involved in it. We also have to remember not to think of the victims only as the 6 million, but they were one by one by one. And in that courtroom in Jerusalem 50 years ago, people heard the voices of those victims one by one by one in a way that they hadn't heard them before.